It was supposed to be just another date, another evening of forced smiles, empty compliments, and the silent reminder that she wasn't enough. But when Sara walked into that dimly lit restaurant, her heart thudding beneath the layers of insecurity she'd carried for years, she didn't know her life was about to change forever. The man waiting at the table, tall, confident, eyes like he'd seen the world and still wanted more, smiled when he saw her. Not the polite smile people give out of courtesy. No, this one was real. It was the kind that said, "I see you." And that was enough to shake something inside her, but before she could even sit, she said the words that had lived on her tongue for years: "No one marries a fat girl, sir." The man's smile didn't fade. Instead, he leaned forward and said softly, "Then let's prove them all wrong." Sara had spent most of her life being told what she couldn't be. She couldn't wear bright colors because they made her look bigger. She couldn't eat dessert in public without the whispers that followed. She couldn't be loved, not truly, because people like her were meant to be the funny friend, not the leading lady. By the time she turned 28, the walls around her heart were thick with rejection. Every relationship she'd tried to build had collapsed under the weight of someone else's expectations. She didn't expect much from the blind date her cousin had arranged. It was a setup she'd agreed to only because her mother begged her to try one more time. Her mother still believed in the fairy tale endings she saw in dramas, where girls like Sara magically lost weight and then earned love. But Sara didn't believe in magic anymore. She believed in mirrors and silence, both equally cruel. The man's name was Ayaan Malik. CEO of one of the country's fastest-growing tech firms, he was the kind of man who seemed to have everything: success, charm, presence. Yet, as Sara sat across from him, she noticed something in his eyes that surprised her. It wasn't pity. It wasn't curiosity. It was understanding. "So," she said nervously, tracing the rim of her glass, "I'm sure I'm not what you expected." He smiled again, the same soft, calm smile. "Actually, you're exactly what I was hoping for." Sara laughed, awkward, disbelieving. "You don't have to say that. I know how these things work. People like me aren't, well, we're not the type you show off." Ayaan's voice was steady. "Maybe the problem isn't you, Sara. Maybe it's what people think the type should look like." That night, they talked for hours. About books, dreams, the quiet loneliness of success, and the way judgment could crush even the strongest hearts. He told her how his own journey hadn't been as effortless as it seemed, how he'd grown up poor, mocked for his accent, underestimated because of where he came from. "They said people like me couldn't make it either," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Now I'm here. So maybe it's time we stop listening to them." When Sara got home that night, something strange happened. She couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, she felt seen beyond her body. But old habits die hard. By the next morning, doubt crept back in. "He's just being kind," she told herself. "Men like him don't fall for women like me." Weeks turned into months. Ayaan and Sara kept meeting, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to walk and talk. He never once commented on her weight. He never made her feel small. And slowly, without realizing it, she started to open up, but the world around them wasn't kind. At a company event, someone whispered loud enough for Sara to hear, "Is that the girl he's dating? She's not really CEO material, is she?" Sara laughed it off, but that night, she cried quietly in her car before driving home. When Ayaan found out, he was furious. "You don't have to prove yourself to anyone," he told her. "But that's easy for you to say," she snapped, her voice trembling. "You're the golden boy, everyone loves you. I've spent my whole life trying to be invisible so people wouldn't laugh at me. You don't understand what that's like." He was silent for a moment before saying, "Then let's make them look. Not at what they want to see, but at what they should see." And that was the start of everything. Ayaan began involving Sara in his company's charity projects, helping her design campaigns for body positivity, mental health, and inclusion. At first, she hesitated, terrified of being in the public eye. But Ayaan was patient. He pushed her gently, encouraging her to use her voice. When she finally spoke at a women's leadership event, her hands shook, her voice cracked, but her words were powerful. "I used to believe I had to shrink myself to be loved," she said. "But I realized the only people who can't love me as I am are the ones who never learned how to love themselves." The applause was thunderous. Ayaan stood at the back of the hall, pride gleaming in his eyes. Their love grew quietly but deeply. It wasn't the kind that made headlines, it was the kind that healed. Ayaan proposed on a rainy evening, in the same restaurant where they'd first met. Sara cried so hard she could barely speak. When she finally said yes, he whispered, "Now let's prove them all wrong." The wedding was small, no designer gowns, no glamour. Just two people who'd stopped hiding. When Sara walked down the aisle, her mother cried, not because her daughter had finally found someone, but because she had finally found herself. Months later, Sara launched her own foundation, the Enough Project, helping young women overcome body shame and find confidence. She often spoke about that one sentence she once believed with all her heart: "No one marries a fat girl." And how wrong she had been, because love, she learned, wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. And sometimes, all it takes is one person who looks at you and says, "Let's prove them all wrong." By the time the story ended, the viewers watching could feel it, the weight of every doubt they'd ever carried, melting into something softer, hope, because deep down, everyone wants what Sara found, someone who doesn't just fall in love with your body, but with your courage to exist in it, unapologetically.